Pranams to all of you. This is part 5 of the video series on Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. So in this video we are going to talk about some selected stories and anecdotes from the life of Sri Bhagavan, right from his early days until his Mahanirvana. There are so many stories, but it would be almost impossible to narrate all those stories even in 2-3 videos. So what we have done is we have selected some stories from his life and events that happened around him, and we are going to narrate that in brief. During his early days in Arunachala, when he was staying in Sadguru cave, Guhai Namasivayar cave, and even up to Virupaksha cave, he used to come down the hill, go to the town and beg for his food. You know what he would do? He would go to a street in Tiruvannamalai, the town, stand in front of a house, clap his hands and wait for the people at home to come out. And invariably they would come. The moment they heard the clap, they knew it was this young Swami from the hill, and they would rush out and offer him food. And you know what he used to do? He used to cup his hands and take the food in his hands and eat it then and there. And after he has eaten, he would wipe his hands on the head and walk away. And Bhagavan later on said, those days when he was begging food and eating from his hands, wiping his hands on the head and just walking away, he felt like an emperor, a Chakravarti. Absolutely no, burdens or anything in his mind. The mind was so profound and clear. So that was one of the earliest, experiences that we hear from Bhagavan's life. That's how he used to, feed himself at least once a day from the people in the town of Tiruvannamalai. And then he would go back to his cave and be absorbed as usual. And very early on, even when Bhagavan was still young, in his 20s, the devotees around, people around noticed that Sri Bhagavan's head was shaking, like that. You could see that in the, video archives of Sri Bhagavan. It's there in the internet, in the YouTube. So his head would go on shaking. And the devotees and people asked him, Bhagavan, you're so young, why is that your head is shaking? And Sri Bhagavan would reply, what to do if you tie a big elephant in a small little hut? What else will happen? What was he referring to? This great big being, which was Ramana, which we call Ramana, was in that small little body. And so the body could not bear the presence of that great being, and therefore it had many of its own problems, including this head shaking. So that was there right till the end of Ramana's life. The head will go on shaking. That fellow also want to talk. What to do? So, and whenever Bhagavan would sit and be absorbed, the whole body would become motionless, absolutely still, including the movement of the head. The movement of the head would stop. But then otherwise, when he was in his normal life, the head would continue shaking, mild shaking. People thought it was a disease, a disorder of Bhagavan, but it was not, because the body could not bear the profound presence of that enlightened being. And during the early days, when devotees had gathered around Sri Bhagavan, all these, attendants like Parani Swami and other people would go out to the town to beg food for Bhagavan and his attendants. So they would sing some song, Shiva song or whatever song they had in mind, they would sing that, and the moment the town people heard their song, they would come out of their house, give them food, offer them food, and that's how they would collect their food every day. But then the other sadhus and the beggars around the town noticed this is how these people gather their food, and so they also started imitating Bhagavan's devotees, and they went much earlier than Bhagavan's attendants went for food. And what happened? The people at home, they thought they are also the attendants of Bhagavan, and they offered them food. And when the actual attendants of Bhagavan went for food, they hardly got anything or very little. And so these attendants were requesting Sri Bhagavan, "Oh Bhagavan, please give us a song, give us a composition, write a composition and give that. So with that, we go and beg the food. So people will recognize that we are from Sri Bhagavan's cave, ashram." Bhagavan just listened and kept quiet. But then after a few days, few weeks or whatever, they all went for Giri Pradikshanam, going around the Arunachala hill. And on their way towards Giri Pradikshanam, on one spot near a temple, the group came and they all sat there just to relax for a while, and then suddenly the poetry started flowing from Sri Bhagavan. It went on and people noted down, and the flow was continuous. And in a period of time, Sri Bhagavan completed all the 108 verses of poetry, which was later called Aksharamanamaalai. That was how Aksharamanamaalai came out, poured out of Sri Bhagavan. And Sri Bhagavan used to say later, Aksharamanamaalai fed Sri Bhagavan and his attendants for many years. Because with this great composition of Sri Bhagavan, they went to the town, sang this Aksharamanamaalai, and the moment the townspeople knew, they heard the song before and they knew that this group is from Bhagavan, and they offered food. That's how Bhagavan used to say, this song fed Bhagavan and his several attendants for many, many years. That was how Aksharamanamaalai was born. So, for those who want to listen to this song, I have given in the description box below the link to this song. It's a Tamil composition, brilliant composition of Sri Bhagavan. Listen to that. Once in Sri Ramanasramam, the devotees had, dug for water near the ashram, and they found a spring very close to the ashram. And so they put a dried tree stump, stuck it on the ground where the spring was discovered, and left it there. And people noticed a crow, from somewhere had come and was sitting on top of the pole. And the devotees tried to chase it away, but it would not budge. It just stood there on the pole. 3 days it was standing on the pole. And so the third day, when Bhagavan was coming down the hill after his walk, Kunju Swami told Sri Bhagavan about the story, the crow that had come 3 days ago, and how much ever we drive away the crow, it refuses to go, and it is sitting there on top of the pole. And Bhagavan immediately asked, what happened? He took his kamandalu, which is very rare. After his walk, he will go to his room, the hall, and sit there, and then he won't move until lunch bell or dinner bell goes. So the moment Kunju Swami told this to Bhagavan, Bhagavan got up, took his kamandalu, and went straight to the pole where the crow was sitting, and he caressed the crow, stroked it gently, and said, what happened? And that was the first time in 3 days the crow opened its eyes and looked at Bhagavan. And Bhagavan, one look, he understood. He took his kamandalu, poured water from the kamandalu into the mouth of the crow, and the moment the crow drank water from Bhagavan's kamandalu, whatever that cup he carries always, as soon as the crow drank the water, it fell dead in Sri Bhagavan's hand. Remarkable. So even today, if you go to Sri Ramanashram, you will find the samadhi of that crow. Even today, next to Cow Lakshmi's samadhi. Amazing. Bhagavan used to say, many of these yogis and siddhas in Tiruvannamalai and so many other places, many of them would come to visit Bhagavan, not necessarily in the human form. They would come in the form of animals, birds, leopards. And so, Bhagavan would caution other people, they are not what you think they are. So maybe the crow also was one of a great yogi who came to visit Bhagavan in the body of a crow. Strange. Once it happened, during Virupaksha days, Sundaresa Iyer, one of the closest disciples and devotees of Sri Bhagavan, when he met Bhagavan, he was very young, and one day he thought, what is the use of me going to Sri Bhagavan every day, climbing up the hill and going and meet him? What for? Apparently there seems to be nothing happening. So why should I go? And so for 3 months, a little more than 3 months, exactly 100 days, Sundaresa Iyer did not go to see Bhagavan. And the 101st day, it was becoming unbearable. Sundaresa Iyer, couldn't bear it any longer. And he literally ran up the hill. And he went to Bhagavan's place. And the moment Bhagavan saw Sundaresa Iyer coming, he got up and came towards Sundaresa Iyer. And Sundaresa Iyer ran towards him, fell on his feet, held Bhagavan's feet tightly, and said, and tears flowing, and said, Bhagavan, I couldn't bear it any longer. And Bhagavan simply asked him, I was wondering, what happened to you? It's more than 3 months. Why didn't you come? And Sundaresh Iyer said, I thought, what is the point of coming and seeing you? So I decided I will not come and see you. But after 100 days, I couldn't stand it any longer. I felt the loss. I ran and came to you. And Sri Bhagavan, you know what he said? He said, that is okay. Even if nothing is happening, apparently, that is okay. But at least you knew, you were aware of the loss of not coming and seeing me. And ever since, Sundaresh Iyer never left Sri Bhagavan. Of course, many years later, that once again happened. We'll come to that later. You know, when Bhagavan was, had come to Sri Ramanasramam from Skandashramam, one day, there were a lot of devotees in the old hall where Bhagavan was seated, and suddenly Bhagavan got up, very unusual, took his walking stick and kamandalo and went out of the hall. And people were wondering, the devotees were wondering, unusual, Bhagavan never used to get up and go out like this. And they followed Bhagavan. In fact, they, from Ramanashram, they were watching Bhagavan going towards the pathway to go to Skandashramam. And there, the devotees saw hundreds of monkeys had gathered. And they were making so much of noise, jumping here and there. And Bhagavan went to them, stood there, and people saw from here, he was actually, they found Bhagavan talking to the monkeys for quite some time. And slowly, after a pretty long time, Bhagavan slowly came down. And when he came closer to the devotees noticed that Bhagavan's eyes were swollen, red, and tears were flowing. And they asked Sri Bhagavan, Bhagavan, what happened? And you know what Bhagavan said? All these monkey friends of Sri Bhagavan, who were friends from Virupaksha cave days, in Skandashram also, they were all there. And one day these monkeys are all, with their family and all, they had gone to Skandashram to see and meet and be with Sri Bhagavan. But they didn't find him there. They didn't know that he had come down to Sri Ramanasramam. And they searched all the place, and somehow they found their way down the hill to Ramanasramam. And from there, Skandashramam and about, to come to Ramanasramam, they had to literally cross the territory of other monkey tribes. And it's very dangerous, because one monkey tribe crossing the territory of another monkey tribe, it will end up in a big fight, a battle. So, unmindful of all that, these monkeys had crossed all those territories and come to Sri Bhagavan. And Bhagavan was telling with tears in his eyes, those monkeys were inviting him, where did you go? Please come back to Skandashram, we are missing you so much, in their own language. Of course, Bhagavan could understand their language of the birds and animals and everything. Look at that. These monkeys had come down and through all that dangerous territories to invite Bhagavan back to Skandashramam. And Bhagavan had to send them peacefully. Don't worry, I'm here in Ramanashram. Anytime you can come and go carefully, take care and all that. Like a mother. Look what a marvelous relationship the animals had with Sri Bhagavan. With cow Lakshmi, with crow, with the deer, squirrels, birds, you name it. They were all so close to Bhagavan. They would come and tell their problems, their issues, in their own language. The others won't understand. Cow Lakshmi in Ramanashram, right from the time she came to Sri Ramanashram to stay there for good, almost every day Lakshmi would walk towards Bhagavan's hall from her cow shed, Goshala, and see Bhagavan, touch his feet with her head, look at Bhagavan for some time, and then go back. In fact, before the Goshala was built, for Lakshmi and other cows, there was some few hut sheds. But then as soon as the Goshala was built, even before the other cows or even Lakshmi went into the Goshala, you know what Lakshmi did? She came straight to Sri Bhagavan, and in her own way, she requested Bhagavan to come. And of course, Bhagavan knew their language. Bhagavan immediately got up, followed Lakshmi, and only when Sri Bhagavan entered the newly constructed Goshala, went round the place and checking everything, and then Sri Bhagavan came out, then Lakshmi went. Lakshmi wanted Sri Bhagavan to sanctify that whole Goshala. She was so intelligent. People could notice that she was not an ordinary cow. And one day when Lakshmi came to the hall where Bhagavan was seated, she stood looking at Bhagavan for a long time, and Bhagavan made her come closer to him, put his forehead on Lakshmi's forehead, and stayed there for a long time. And then slowly Bhagavan lifted his head up, looked around at the devotees and told, "You know what state Lakshmi is in? She's in the state of Samadhi." What most humans couldn't understand, those animals understood instantaneously. That was the relationship those animals had with Sri Bhagavan. Cow Lakshmi was an extraordinary animal. She was not an animal. Outwardly, yes, but inwardly, who knows? She must have been a great yogini. Who knows? Once when Bhagavan took his bath towel from a shelf, without his knowing, he didn't know there was a sparrow's nest there, and one of the 3 eggs, when he took his towel, which the eggs were there, and one of the eggs fell down, and Bhagavan was aghast, taken aback. He said, "Oh my God, see what I have done." And he gently, with great care, took that egg. It was there was a crack. And you know what he did? He asked an attendant to bring a piece of wet cloth. It was brought, and Sri Bhagavan tied the wet cloth around that egg and carefully placed the egg in the same place. And every day, for several times, every day, he would come and go on looking at that egg with this absolute love and compassionate look. And after a few days, the shell broke and the little one was coming out of that. The moment Bhagavan saw that, he was so overjoyed, his face lit up, and he took the little one in his hands, caressed it and stroked it, looked at it for a long time, and then gave this bird to other people to be felt. Compassion and love, they alone know. The great ones alone know what love is, compassion is. None of us. Our love and our compassion and our care is all business. They alone know what love is. Love with a capital L. Amazing. In Ramanasramam, every now and then Sri Bhagavan would go to the kitchen and help those people. Shantama party, Sampurnammal party, and many others. He would get up very early in the morning, 2:30, 3 o'clock, finish his ablutions and go to the kitchen to help all those people cutting vegetables and so on. And one day, Muruganar Swami also was in the kitchen, and Bhagavan sitting in one place, he was cutting the vegetables and greens and all that. Muruganar Swami also was sitting opposite to Bhagavan and cutting vegetables. And as they were going about their cutting vegetables, Sri Bhagavan was looking at what Muruganar was doing, and suddenly Sri Bhagavan burst out laughing and looked at Muruganar and said, "Yeah, the way you cut the vegetables, it's like you running your family." Because Muruganar Swami was cutting in a very, haphazard way, here and there, and not neat at all. He didn't know how to cut. He was not used to all that. So Bhagavan remarked, "Your vegetable cutting is like you're running the family." And Muruganar Swami got a little upset, sad. He went away, and within a few minutes came back with a poem written with a small, 4 or 5 lines poem, and gave it to Bhagavan. And Bhagavan, reading that poem, he was laughing aloud. You know what Muruganar had written there? "Bhagavan, it's easy for you to tease me." In Tamil language, he has written this beautiful poem. The meaning is this: "Bhagavan, it's easy for you to tease me because I am not used to all this. What will you do if you get married and have a family?" Right? Bhagavan was laughing aloud. After many years, Sundaresh Iyer again, after 40 years of being with Bhagavan, because he was a school teacher, he was being transferred to another place. And he was lamenting, he was crying, "Oh Bhagavan, they have transferred me, I am leaving Bhagavan, what will I do?" And Bhagavan looked at Sundaresh Iyer and said, "How long you have been with Bhagavan?" And Sundaresh Iyer said, 40 years. I've never left you." And Sri Bhagavan, looking at the other devotees who were all standing there, "Look at this man. He has been with me for 40 years and now he is telling he is leaving and going away from Bhagavan." Right? Every moment Sri Bhagavan was teaching people in his own way. There was another incident where, one day the lunch bell rang in Ramanasramam, and Bhagavan slowly took his walking stick and started moving out of the hall. And just when he came out of the hall, he saw an old shepherd standing there. The moment Bhagavan looked at this old man, he said, "Oh, Chinnappa, you have come after a long time. You have come to see me." And he was, he didn't know what to say, because he's coming after a long time to see Bhagavan. And he had a bag hanging from his shoulder and something in the bag. And Sri Bhagavan looked at the bag and said, "Oh Chinnappa, what have you brought me? Give me. And Chinnappa said, "Swami, kur, porridge." Because he's a very poor person, he wanted to give something to Sri Bhagavan, and he had bought whatever was at home, porridge. So Bhagavan said, Come, take that and give me." And as usual, Bhagavan cupped his hands. He slowly took the pot, which was full of porridge, and started pouring porridge into Bhagavan's hands. And Bhagavan very happily and joyfully drank all that. Bhagavan said, Come, empty the vessel. And he drank all that. And by then, somebody from the dining hall had come out and see, why is Bhagavan taking so long? Lunch bell is gone, no sign of Bhagavan. So he came out to see what's happening. And he saw Bhagavan drinking this porridge from this old man's earthen pot. And the attendant, the devotee who had come from the dining hall said, "Oh Bhagavan, We are all waiting for you to have food in the dining hall. And look, you are having a feast here from this old man's vessel. And you know what Bhagavan said, looking at the attendant? He said, "Oh, I am only for people like you who fed me when I was in the hill. People like him, people like Chinnappa. He only fed me when I was in the hill. And after a long time he had come to see me." Right? Bhagavan's compassion. Once there was this stray dog, completely, body ridden with bruises and pus and all that. And whenever this dog came to, near Bhagavan, or the dog wanted to come closer to Bhagavan, the other people would chase the dog away. And the dog was trying to come closer to Bhagavan, but they would chase away. And one evening, Bhagavan went up little to the hill to, empty his bladder. And then one attendant also had gone behind Bhagavan to help Sri Bhagavan. And Bhagavan went, and it was a pretty long time. Bhagavan is taking so long to come. And so this attendant went to find out what is Bhagavan doing, why is he taking so long. He went in, little further up, and then he saw Sri Bhagavan sitting on the ground, squatting on the ground, and this stray dog licking Bhagavan's body all over with this tail wagging like anything. That stray dog which was chased away by other people, it was licking Bhagavan all over. So happy, overjoyed. And Bhagavan was looking at the stray dog and said, "Is it enough? Is it enough? Can I go now?" Right? And next day they found this stray dog dead on the pathway. So maybe it had come to Bhagavan, the last few hours of its life. Who knows whether this is a dog or somebody else. And during the last days, when Bhagavan was, with the sarcoma in his left arm, the cancer in his left arm, operations, everything got over, and he was lying down, so weak and tired in the Nirvana room. And the devotees and, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of devotees had come because they knew Bhagavan was going away. And they were all going and seeing Bhagavan, having his darshan. And in a long line, one after the other, they used to go to the front of the hall, see Bhagavan, maybe a second or two, do pranams and prostration, whatever, and the next person will come, and like that, And there was one person in the queue who wrote something in a small little piece of paper. And when his turn came, he looked at Bhagavan, did pranams, and threw this little piece towards his feet. I mean, they were not supposed to do that, Of course. Then he went away. Bhagavan gently, with great difficulty, picked up that piece of paper, read what he had written, and called the attendants to bring that person. And the attendants ran, on either side, two attendants caught him and brought him, as if they were bringing a culprit. And the moment he was brought in front of Bhagavan's room, Sri Bhagavan looked up at him, gave a big smile, and nodded his head. So what was written on that piece of paper? This poor fellow, a family man with all that worries and pain, he had written, "Bhagavan, please save me." That's all he had written. And Sri Bhagavan read that, looked at him and nodded his head. "Yes, I will take care of," without uttering a word. And this man, with tears flowing, pranams to Bhagavan, went his way. Like this, there are so many stories around Bhagavan. As I told you earlier, it will be nearly impossible to bring all those stories. And they are all available in so many books devotees had written. It is available in the YouTube, it's available in the net, blogs, Sri Ramanasramam's website. So those who are interested, read all of them. It's available. So with this, we come to the end of this video, part 5. Some of the stories we had narrated, definitely not all of them, whatever little. So possibly in the next video, we will go into the teachings and sayings of Bhagavan. What all he said. Of course, very rarely he spoke, for some time. Most of the time he was silent. His teaching was silence, living silence. So whatever he had uttered, we will take a few of that and go into that in our next video. Thank you. Pranams to all of you.